So today my goal is to get you to understand what metabolism is in the body, and in future videos we can sort of discuss how to influence or improve the metabolism. But today we're going to stick to the fundamentals and just try to understand what it is. I've accompanied my explanations with analogies relating metabolism to trucking and how a truck works and the combustion of diesel fuel. So I hope that my examples are relatable to you guys and something that you can understand. So I do appreciate that most of you guys, you're going to have knowledge in logistics and mechanics. You may not have a background in the body. You may not know, how different things work or understand some of the terminology. I get that. So I've done my best to, give simple and relatable explanations today. So there are actually 3 different subsets of metabolism. These 3 subsets contribute to your overall metabolism. They make up your overall metabolism. The first one is called your basal metabolism, and we have an analogy ready for you to relate it to trucks. Your basal metabolism is how much fuel your truck chews through when you're just idling. When the truck is on, but you are idling in a parking lot. So however much diesel fuel your truck is combusting, we're going to call it at rest when it's not moving and idling. Guys, that's basically your basal metabolism. So what the basal metabolism is how much energy is required to keep the lights on, figuratively speaking, within your factory, So the way they measure basal metabolism in lab settings and nutritional science, it's basically like you have to, you're sitting, you're lying down, you're in a bed, and just to lie there and blank, basically to run your brain, to run your organs, like literally to be able to think, to run your brain, to run your detox pathways, so liver, kidneys, for your heart to pump, for your cells to do what they do and produce energy and divide and make new skin and all of the basic physiologic functions in the body, right? To run that factory that is your body, that is your basal metabolism. Okay, so now that we understand basal metabolism, let's go into the next component of metabolism. It's what's known as physical activity. So we'll start this section with an analogy to trucks as we did in the last section. So, we mentioned that basal metabolism is how much energy you'd be burning through at rest, and we compared that to a truck just idling in a parking lot but not moving. Physical activity, it's just like what it sounds like. It's the extra energy that you start to expend when there's any movement involved. So that could be just light movement and activities of daily living, or it could be exercise, which would be more intense. But I'm going to start with a trucking analogy. So the physical activity component when compared to trucks would be like once you put the truck in gear and you start moving, regardless of the speed or regardless of the demand on the engine, that would be like physical activity. So you might be saying to yourself, wow, that sounds like it could vary a whole lot, like how much fuel I'm chewing through. That depends on how heavy of a load I'm moving, the incline or slope that I'm driving up, right? If you had to haul it up, steep terrain, you're going to burn through a lot more fuel. It's a lot more energy required to move it. The speed I'm going at, right? That might also influence fuel consumption. So things like the weight of the load, the speed, the grade or slope it's known as, other driving conditions while moving, all of these are going to affect how much diesel fuel you combust, how much fuel you chew through. Well, physical activity, to draw my parallel or make my comparison, is a lot like that. There are a ton of variables in this component of metabolism, and it really just depends on all of those different factors involved. So physical activity could, mean walking from your residence to the mailbox and then back inside, or it could mean, doing wind sprints or, a triathlon or playing a football game or doing high intensity cardio. All of those that's also physical activity. And obviously the amount of fuel chewed through is going to be, just tremendously different. When your heart rate's up like that, you're working up a sweat, you're going to be burning a lot of energy in a short period of time versus taking a light walk. So physical activity is a massively variable one. But what I would tell you of how you could, leverage or use this info, because we're just starting here by just trying to explain to you the basics. And then, as we progress through the channel, we can go into how we influence these different things. But physical activity is going to be the most easily influenced part of metabolism. That means there's something you could do about it. So most people can change their physical activity levels, thereby boosting their metabolism or the amount of energy they burn and expend just by changing, their activity levels. So that's sort of the takeaway there. So the last component of metabolism, known as the thermic effect of feeding or the thermic effect of food. So I'll go ahead and start with an analogy like I've been doing in each section here. This one may be a little bit more difficult to draw a direct analogy to a truck and how they work mechanically, but I'll do my best. Full disclosure, this might not be mechanically accurate, but I'm going to use this for the sake of an example. So imagine that there was an energy cost associated with the truck actually using the using the diesel fuel. So it might be like the amount of energy needed to run the fuel pump or to actually move the fuel around and for the engine to work and for all of those different processes. If it cost a certain amount of diesel fuel to use the diesel fuel, or to get the energy out, that is basically the thermic effect of feeding in the body. So thermic, pertaining to temperature and heat effect, so the results of something. And then feeding is another way of saying, eating or consuming energy or food. So the thermic effect of feeding, guys, is basically the caloric expense or cost, the energy cost associated with getting the energy out of food. To actually extract the energy and the nutrition within food, it costs some energy. Now, it's important to note that different foods have a different impact on thermic effect of feeding. At one end of the spectrum, we have heavily processed foods, which often are high in energy or calories, but have a low demand or a low impact on the thermic effect of feeding, which in my opinion is not a great thing for people who are struggling with metabolism. It can often lead to a caloric surplus where they are taking in more energy than what they expend. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have fibrous vegetables, which are typically not that high in energy. They don't really have much protein or fat in them. They typically have just a little bit of carbohydrates, a little bit of sugar. And they have a lot of fiber, which makes them labor intensive to digest. Although it's a myth that there are any net negative foods that actually cost more to digest than what they give you in calories, there are some foods where that ratio, is favorable. And it tends to be whole foods, guys. So, vegetables, things like that, they have a good thermic effect of feeding. Also, high protein foods that are tough to break down, like steaks and things like that, tend to have a high thermic effect of feeding. So what would someone who is struggling with obesity or, needs to get their body fat or weight down want to do? They would probably want to be tapping into this aspect of metabolism and, taking advantage of this thermic effect of feeding by eating less processed and more whole foods. Now, we're going to get into that in more detail in another video on metabolism. I'm going to go over how to actually affect each aspect of metabolism, how to influence it. So that's what I want to touch upon in closing here in this video. Hopefully you understand and comprehend now each subset of metabolism: basal metabolic rate, physical activity, and thermic effect of feeding. Now, in terms of what we can do with that, I can actually show you, if someone was to want to improve their metabolism, how they would go in and on each of those subsets do something with their lifestyle, to be able to improve that. Most of the examples that I will give have to do with lifestyle, and a couple of them have to do with, getting checked for medical conditions and getting appropriate medical treatment if that turns up to be an issue for that particular individual. So hope to speak to you soon. Hope you understand the relevance of these concepts and the importance and the place that it might have in you, maintaining a healthy weight over the road, maintaining your health over the road, feeling better, the relevance to the DOT physical, if you were able to lose body fat and improve your health. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will speak to you soon.